Listen up, healthcare workers. It's Arleen Smith, and I am so glad that you're here this week. I want to talk about a topic that I know you know all about. This absolute tragedy of this shooting of this UnitedHealthcare CEO and how this really rocked the field of healthcare. And what I want to talk about is how that story relates to you as a trained healthcare professional. Because when I think about this entire situation, regardless of what you think about whether you believe it was right or wrong or all the different reasons for it, I'm sure you will agree with me that this is absolutely a tragedy for healthcare. And why? Because I think for all of us, I know when it happened for me, it was just sort of this aha moment reminder of the fragility in our healthcare system. And you are the people that take care of all of those individuals that come to you that are sick, not well, and never at their personal best. And for you, as a trained professional, you need to be really looking at the way you're interacting with the people that you serve. And I know in the very early days of this story, I was really sort of searching through, just like probably many of you. And I think this really uncovered what many of us have seen, right? This frustration and this anger in the sort of public healthcare sector of the healthcare system in and of itself. And I know for me, when I sat back and really thought about it, I really thought about how we all play such an important role in making sure that the people that come through any healthcare system are feeling respected and they're feeling like they're treated with dignity and compassion. And we really always manage things with a heart of empathy. And as a healthcare professional, you know this, we're not going to fix the system. I wish we could. I honestly wish we could. But you know this, it's like many, many, many pay grades above all of us. But the call to action for us as trained healthcare professionals is really to focus on those things that we can control. And that's us, right? We can't always control what's happening around us. You know this. But we can control how we respond in every situation. And can we all agree that you know this, the people that come to us every day, it's not like they're coming to the spa, right? They're coming to us because they're sick and they're not well. And again, we're never going to see them at their personal best. And we have to really accept that. And I want you to really just think about this for a minute. How much, not only physical pain, but how much emotional pain people are carrying and how that affects their personality when they walk through those doors. Listen, I know when I am not well, I am not acting at my personal best. And I think about this time in my career. When I worked in the ER, I had an incident that happened where I injured my back. And I had to, seek help through corporate health and, go through treatments. And I will never forget that very acute phase where I had physical therapists working on me and they were like, oh, it's this, right? And they started working on me and then put me in an exam room, waiting for a corporate physician to evaluate me. And in that span of like 40 minutes, my back just locked up. I was sobbing in pain. No one was coming into my room. I was just feeling as if I couldn't even imagine. I was thinking in my head, how do I crawl out of this situation, out of this exam room, and make my way across the street to the emergency room? That's really how I felt. And I'll never forget when that doctor walked in. She just saw it, in me and recognized that I was really at a bad place. And I'm going to remind you, for all the people that you serve in the profession of healthcare, that's exactly how our patients feel. That's how their families feel. These are the people that love them the most. And they will do anything to make that person feel better. And so in healthcare, we really do have to examine this tragedy because we have to think about how it relates to us and the way we interact. And what I notice the most when I'm doing any kind of education in the healthcare space is this sort of understanding that for so many of us, we really need to go back to the basics. I mean, I really feel this just deep inside of my heart. I feel like many of the skills that we need to manifest every single day, especially in stressful situations, as licensed, skilled professionals, they really are going to come from a place where we've got to do everything right from the very beginning at the basic moment. And I will tell you, I feel like our job here in Life School, I mean, we are the people that are called to do this important work. It's because, compassion really is something that we're compelled to do. And remember, in the most simplest form of that definition, it's really your ability as another human being to alleviate someone's pain and suffering. I mean, you notice it, you see it, you observe it, and it's so painful to you that you can't just walk on by. You have to stop what you're doing, and you've got to address it, and you've got to deal with it, and you just have to be the person that brings the solution. And that's what makes us so great in this space. I mean, for so many of us, that's really where we land. And I want you to think about this. I mean, I really want you to think about this. How do you go about your day? I mean, your typical day. From the point in which you get an assignment to the point in which you're interacting with every single patient, family member, every single leader, peer, every person that you come in contact with. There's an interaction there every single time. And we have to think about this. And we have to actually do a little education around this, because if we are coming to our place of work where people need to be healed, and we're coming from a place where we recognize that, like, sign me up, I'm the person that's here and I'm a healer and I can make this person better. And that's like the embodiment of my spirit. That's sort of how I walk across this earth and I navigate even in challenging times. My interactions is I'm always going to put a person first with that mindset that I'm going to do my personal and professional best to heal them of whatever it is that they're experiencing without placing any judgment or blame. I mean, not everybody can do this. You would agree, right? I mean, this is why we have to go back to basics. But I feel like for the healthcare workers that can do this, like, this is your total superpower. I mean, this is what you were destined to do. This is probably what fills you up at the end of the day, because when you lay your head down at night and you put your head on that pillow, you know that you gave this level of care where it was transformative for somebody. I mean, you were the person that made a difference. And I want you to really think about this, because it's times like this when healthcare is in a little bit of a state of crisis, where this public perception is of frustration and anger, and they just want the best for their family members and those that they love. This is a big problem in healthcare, because the work that we do over time has just evolved to become this very highly task-driven sort of mindset. There are so many issues that result because people are looking at healthcare really as a task. Really not as how are we all working as an interdisciplinary team? How do we support one another? How do we make the best of a really difficult situation regardless of what's happening? Now, listen, I know that takes incredible leadership. I mean, leaders are the ones that pave the way for that to happen. It happens naturally and it happens organically when you have that sort of mindset. But you can still lead from the middle, and you can lead by example. And again, you can practice being the best version of you. That's what you control. So you can be you, and you can be driven to a place where you recognize that the end result is not that you're going about things in a robotic way, where you're really looking at things sort of from that task mindset, and you're going through just like the motions of providing care. Be really, really aware of that and how that makes a person feel when that's our mindset. When we don't even give consideration to the fact that we're forgetting that there are people behind every single interaction. And not only are there people behind those interactions, the people are experiencing pain and burden and struggle and suffering because they just want so desperately to have someone to help them be better and to really step in that place where they can be healed and go about the business of their life. And that's the reality of the work that we do. That is why it's so full of challenges, because maybe for some of you, that's how you started out. You started out with this sort of mindset and this idea of it doesn't matter what's going to happen. This is the way I'm always going to provide care and care delivery regardless of the situation. But what I see so often in our field in healthcare is that as human beings, we're very prone to having our responses be based on our situations, right? We're not sort of aware of what's happening in our exact environment and how that really is influencing the way we engage in conversations, the way we engage in care delivery, the way we engage with one another. And we have to be really adapt to really be able to see how we can do that better. I mean, that's really our call to action for every single one of us. And I will tell you, for me, I think a big piece of this puzzle is really being able to look at your situation from a lens of making sure that every single day you recognize this work is full of challenges. This work is incredibly difficult to do, especially if you're not working from a place where people come together and work organically as a team to support one another in the tough times and in the good times. And not everybody has that freedom to be able to do that. But if you're not in that space, then at the end of every single day, and maybe at the beginning of every single day, you need to determine how you're going to integrate self-care into your everyday routine. Because if you don't, you run the risk that you are going to find yourself in a state where you can very easily see that, you know what, I can see myself losing a little piece of me every single day. And so when I think about this story, this tragedy of this killing of the CEO in, the middle of Manhattan at the beginning of the morning before sort of all of the activity in the day, I always go to a place where I love to examine sort of the lessons of this tragedy. I love to look at these things and sort of deconstruct them to really think about what are some of those lessons that we can all take from this, right? And the first lesson is we're not fixing healthcare. All right, as healthcare professionals, this isn't where we can put our emphasis. I mean, have to have trust and faith that those above us are going to make the right decisions, and we're going to really be positioned to be able to give care in the way that we were designed to do that. But I'm going to remind you, the thing that you can do is really focus on those things that you can fix. And that is really making certain that you're meeting the professional standards every single time and you're integrating that into care delivery. And it's not just the personal standards, but it's the ethical decision making and all of the regulatory requirements. Like I always like to say you're only as good as if someone is not watching you and how you're delivering that care. And I'm going to remind you that the people that we serve, they are not at their best. And because they're not at their best, they're not always going to come across and make really good decisions or respond in a way that's going to make you feel really good inside. They may even be a type of person that is able to push a whole lot of buttons in you. And that may be a person that really is able to just take you away from giving that best care possible. So why should you even be interested and worried about the type of approach that you bring into the workplace? I mean, why bother? I think about this woman. I was traveling, doing a lot of traveling this week, and I was in and out of the airport. And I was going into Newark Airport, and it was very early in the morning. I want to say, my flight was at 6 a.m., so it had to be, I don't know, maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And this woman was greeting everybody, and she was pointing out all the things that people did that they looked fabulous. And the two women behind me were like, oh my God, she's the only happy person in this entire airport. And I was shouting back out to her, and I just kept thinking to myself, this is somebody at the airport that all they're doing is making people feel a little lighter around the holidays to really make them see things in a different way. And I'm going to remind you, as healthcare professionals, this is our duty and our responsibility. I mean, we have to constantly be monitoring our environment. We have to constantly be adapting to what's happening around us. But if we're not even zeroed in on our own approach and how we're entering into a person's personal space and how we do that from a place of respect, then how good are we going to be in healing that person? I mean, we're not going to be effective. And you know what's going to result is you're going to feel a lot heavier in the sense that your superpower is not going to be engaged, and you're not going to feel like you're doing a great job. And your heart is going to be full of heaviness and feelings like of doubt and feelings of apathy and feelings like you don't want to be in the field anymore. And so I'm always going to remind you that a big portion of everything you do here in Life School is developing your expert noticing skills. I must educate on this probably daily because I truly believe that we need more and more people in healthcare to really get this point across, which is if you are not an expert noticer, if you haven't developed your skills to be acutely aware of what's happening around you, and that means before every single interaction, you are giving consideration to the way you are engaging with people. If you're not doing that, you are not going to be able to make a difference with people, because part of it means you've got to go on the fly. And part of it means that if you go into that room and someone is angry and frustrated, and they probably are because 10 things happened right before you came in, had nothing to do with you, and you just happen to get the brunt of all of it, right? If you then choose to be activated from that response, then what do you think happens? Nothing good comes from that. So you'll always hear me say in my education that there's some degree of preparation that's involved here. And I want you to always be thinking about the person that you're caring for. Like every single time, I want you to be thinking about how you can make a difference in that individual. And really working from this place of empathy where I'm going to have an empathic response, and I'm going to really refrain from being in a state of judgment. And I'm going to refrain from being activated maybe by the way someone responds to me. And I'm going to refrain from allowing myself to not show compassion and empathy and take a kind and loving approach when someone is going through really difficult times. And that means that we have to be aware of the things that we do consciously. All of those conscious biases where we're aware that we have those tendencies, and that unconscious bias, those things that seem to surface up. And I always like to say, like, those are the things that we might not even be attuned to, that it's something that happens in our space, and it can be very, very triggering for us. And it can take us to a place where we lose our ability to be empathic, and we lose our ability to show compassion. And what comes out as a result are all of those harsh things instead. And one of the things that I will always educate you on is, we live in a world where we are all different. Like, thank God there's not like 1,000 Arleens that are like walking around me, because I would annoy myself. I would be like, get out of here. I need to be around people that are different from me, because it makes me see other perspectives. It allows me to do that perspective taking of someone else and to be able to appreciate their gifts, their skills, and their talents. And whether they come from a different cultural place or they come from a different place where their belief systems are very different than mine, maybe religiously, that's okay too. I mean, healthcare needs to be a safe place where people feel like they can be themselves, where they can share how they're feeling in that moment, and not just share it with a trained professional, but that person is there to help guide and support them, and to really be able to be there from that place of understanding how it makes a person feel. And I will tell you, when you do the deep work here in life school and you work on your own emotional system, and what I mean by that is, again, you need to be aware of your approach. You need to be aware of those things that can trigger you, or those things, those behaviors and those responses and those actions that could be triggering someone else. And I know when I do a lot of education, I love working with trained mental health professionals to develop content around, taking a trauma-informed, approach to healthcare. And you know what this is, right? This is this recognition that in this world, we just have to make the assumptions in healthcare that everybody has gone through some bit of trauma, and many people have not sought professional support or help for that. And as a result of that, they are left navigating this earth with a lot of things that can be very triggering to them. And if we're not even aware of that person's triggers, and we don't integrate that into the way we provide care, well, then we're not being empathetic to their needs, and we can actually cause harm as a result. And I love to educate around this because, the easiest principle for me when I do a lot of education is, talking about very traumatic events and things for people, like war being one of them, right? I mean, just imagine what it must be like to be living in that kind of environment where you're hearing the constant threat of things, bombs going off, and you're constantly being bombarded by this feeling of, I'm not safe, and, I'm going to be harmed at any point in time, right? And so things like loud noises, explosions, anything that can be surprising or shocking to someone, even in a safe healthcare setting, can cause that person to take them right back to that traumatic event. And as a result, what happens is they re-experience that trauma all over again. And again, part of our role is really to be the person that never causes harm. And I want you to think about that. I mean, that's part of the work that we all do. When we took these positions, hopefully many of you, when you took your position, that was what guided you, was this recognition that, I'm going to do what's best for the person, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not introducing anything that's going to cause that person to be harmed. And I know for me, the more work that I do on really knowing my own triggers, it really helps me in a better position where I can make a conscious choice not to be activated. Right. And I love the difference between being triggered and activated, right? Because trigger sometimes is subconscious. We're not even aware that that's happening, right? Something happens in our environment, or somebody said something, and it takes us right back. For some people, it could be a smell. It could be, an environmental stimuli. It could be a song. It could be really pretty much anything. Activation's a little different. That's when we're doing the deep work. We understand that this is a trigger, and instead I'm not going to be activated. I'm not going to have an emotional response. I'm going to control my breathing. I'm going to do things that I can to kind of settle my emotional system and make sure I'm working from a place where, I'm within control. And this takes a lot of work to do. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm going to tell you, the people that do this work understand it's incredibly freeing. There's so much freedom that's associated with it, because you're not going down this rabbit hole of just wondering why you keep falling into the same traps over and over again. So being able to spot those triggers in yourself is really important. Being able to spot those triggers in other people is equally important. That's why being an expert noticer really matters. And again, if you think about that people come to us and, they're not well, right? And they're sick. They've got all these physical ailments and they feel terrible, right? You're not going to see their personal best. And then if you add in the fact that, before they came to you, there probably was 15, 20 different things that added to all that burden. And then on top of that, right, that person is trying to navigate themselves through getting better and getting well. And if they happen to have a caregiver or someone that's offering care to them, a trained professional that's not responding with empathy and love and kindness and compassion, then that's like the matchstick that just strikes the whole forest fire off. And so that is why it's so incredibly important and why I keep saying like we've got to go back to basics, because for so many of us in healthcare, again, the way we learn things, task oriented, right? I do this, right? And so it's very transactional, and we've got to get to a place where we slow ourselves down sometimes, where we really allow ourselves to focus on the individual in that moment. We kind of slow our pace down. We recognize how we're bringing our own energy into that space, right? And we're making a conscious choice and saying, I'm not going to allow myself to do that, right? And people do it in all different ways, right? People do it through imagery. People do it through just slowing down their pace, taking a couple deep breaths. For me, that works really, really good, is just like taking 3 really deep breaths and allowing my body to release, and that tension just like kind of drifts away. And we all need to do this because we take care of people, and everybody in this world is navigating at such like a high degree of just a fast-paced environment. So when that happens, everything becomes transactional. There's not a lot of people stopping to slow things down enough to engage with people, to just notice those things in somebody, that somebody is under a high degree of stress, or maybe they're worried about their future, or maybe they just need someone to comfort them, or maybe they just need someone to explain things properly to them. And I feel like, again, when we go back to basics, right, the work that we do is about creating meaningful moments. Like, you want to be that healthcare professional that when people leave and they're well, like they're remembering you. They're remembering what you did during those times. And I feel like, when I had a loved one in the hospital, it was very easy for me to spot team members, whether it was, physicians or practitioners or, nurses or any trained healthcare professional coming in and out. It was very easy to spot the people that had this ability of understanding, like, no, this is really important, right? There's an importance to slowing things down and being able to explain things and be present with people and to be able to do things. And I know it's not 100% possible because, in emergent situations, it's not like we're all sitting there and we have the time to do that, right? I mean, I understand that completely. I know what that's like, in like an emergency situation or working in the ER and trauma, right? There are things that are happening back to back to back, right? So you're not going to always have every single time this ability to do that. But what I'm saying is, for the most part, this is what you're striving to do. Like, you're recognizing that this is where you need to operate from, that empathy is your choice. It's your ability to take perspective of someone else, to like that perspective taking sort of mindset of, let me see this from that person's lens instead of my own. Because believe me, there's like 100 things that's probably reeling through your heads of all the reasons why someone's responding in that way. And I'm going to remind you, like, there's always going to be times where this is going to be really challenging for you to do, especially if you're working in a place where you're like, nobody cares. I mean, I just work with a whole bunch of jerks, and I'm wondering myself, like, why are people in the field of healthcare if they're just mean and rotten, right? Or they just don't like what they do. I mean, don't people get that tap on the shoulder and they're told, like, you know what, maybe it's a good time for you to like explore something else to do, right? Because you take care of people. And the way you care for people really matters. If you're not engaged in that, if you're not really, you don't even care, well, then how will anybody else care? A, you're not making a difference, and B, you're just pulling the weight of everybody down. So if you happen to work in that environment where you're working with a bunch of people that don't care, listen, I'm going to give you the advice that people have given me my entire career. Don't worry about other people. You worry about you, right? You can't control everybody else. You're never going to control other people. And the only thing you really can control is the way you respond in stressful situations. That's it. And you're going to practice this over and over again. And you're going to try to do it in your personal life. You're going to try to do it in your professional life. You're going to do it until you get to a space of mastery. And that's how we learn. And that is how we get to mastery, is we do it over and over again in pretty much every situation until we've sort of cracked it. And we're like, okay, I've got it. You can put me here and here and here, and I can really do it in any kind of situation. So you focus on you. You're not going to change other people, but what you can change is the way you respond. And recognize that right now, with this tragedy in healthcare, it's really going to be a call to action for healthcare workers to be acutely aware of what's happening around you. Listen, I'm going to do a podcast on this for leaders because I think there's some work that leaders need to do in this space as well. But we're not going to worry about the leaders. We're going to worry about you, right? You're going to do you. And in the end of the day, what I want you to be able to do is to be able to look back with this sense of pride, right? To be able to look back and notice where you did things really well. I know I'm not telling you something that you don't know. Most of us are wired to only look at what we don't do. Like that's where our brain goes. It's that negativity bias. And that's the way our brains were sort of designed. So it's going to take some effort and some conscious work to just do this over and over again, to look at things from that perspective of like, how did I do things well today given the situation? Yeah, okay, I couldn't change this and this, but I'm really pleased with the way I handled that in that degree of pressure, or when this happened, whatever it is. Just start by retraining your brain to look at the things that you're doing well. And make sure before you go to sleep at night, you spend a little time in quiet reflection, just like appreciating the fact that you actually did that and you did it well under incredible stress and pressure and probably not the ideal conditions. And you did it despite all the challenges that you faced. And I'm going to just, you'll hear me say this over and over again, pretty much in so many podcasts, but we've got to get to a place again in those pre-COVID times where we are seeking out those moments where we're allowing ourselves to experience joy again. I feel like our entire world is just holding their breath, and everybody is like, I just am holding on tight, just waiting to see how things are going to fall, fail, or happen. And what I want you to do instead is I want you to recognize that for you to be that best healer possible, to manifest all those great superpowers, it's really going to be you bringing joy back into the work that you do, bringing laughter and humor and love. And sometimes it's just being light in the moment of conversation, right? And making someone feel incredibly comfortable. Sometimes it has nothing to do with humor. Sometimes it has everything to do with your ability to help someone redirect or look at a situation differently. So whatever it is with your superpower, what I want you to do is engage in it. I want you to practice it. I want you to do it over and over and over again. But before you go to bed at night, really focusing on those things that give you joy. Really focus on imagining a place where you are that caregiver that regardless of what's happening around, that you can't control, that's like 20 times above your pay grade, that you're not activated by those things. Instead, you're recognizing that you can make a difference in someone's life in the here and now. And we have to have incredible trust and faith that things are going to change in healthcare. I truly believe they will, because I know, just like many of you, you understand that operating from this place over and over again without integrating self-care into your daily routine is just going to take you to a place where you leave healthcare altogether. And to me, that is the most dangerous thing for so many of us. I mean, this is the work you're designed to do. This is part of your DNA. It is who you are. And when you're operating from that place, boy, it just feels extraordinary and amazing because you're taking this superpower, this thing that you do so incredibly well, and you're taking it to a level that others can't imagine. So listen, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope this podcast made you really think about those lessons from this terrible tragedy and how you can change things as a trained healthcare professional. But more importantly, I hope you recognize every single day you are making a difference and you do matter. And the work you do is soul-filling, purposeful work that actually matters and you're making a difference in this world. Even if it's just for one individual, that's what you hold your hat on. So listen, join me in on a future podcast. And if you don't hear it enough, thank you for everything you do every day. Goodbye, everyone.